Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Every now and then, a battle comes down to a materially balanced king and pawn's endgame. When I first started playing chess, I would more often than not lose these endgames. I think that I'm a bit better at it now, and there are some general heuristics that often helps, some of which can be demonstrated in this game I play today. Please enjoy! Let's have a quick look at the review. Now, in this game, we were sort of reasonably balanced, and I got to a bit of an advantage in the sort of the middle game, though I almost lost an advantage towards the end, but managed to win at the end. I played this game fairly well, I thought, with almost 88% accuracy, my opponent at around 80%. So I had some slightly better moves on average, though we both played actually really quite well. Let's now look on at the analysis. I had the black pieces in this game. Opponent played e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. So very sort of normal looking potential Italian at the moment. They played the other knight, so sort of ended up becoming, it was four knights game, but basically into the Giuoco, piano, though probably not quite in the most common move order. Short castles, I short castles, d3, and here I played h6. So the first bit of potentials of asymmetry, basically to stop the advance there. Opponent now brings their knight forward, knight d5, potentially attacking these two squares. Logically, the opponent is now going to capture the knight, but that's okay. Happy to trade, play d6. Yep, so all pretty normal and perfectly balanced. So 0, 0, 0. Opponent plays bishop e3 here. Okay, so it's good for me to know. I wasn't entirely sure what was the best move here. I was pretty sure straight up capturing wasn't the best move. So apparently counter-attacking with the knight on the opponent bishop was best. Here I moved in this position because after captures allowed me to advance the knight. So captures, capture back, and again, basically back to equality. Stockfish reckoned capturing with pawn was better. I didn't exactly like potentially giving up the e file. They captures back at this point. f4, and here I play bishop e6, trade the bishops, push, and now I decided to play queen e5. So fairly equal. So apparently queen to f6 was better according to Stockfish, but pretty equal, I suppose. Queen g4. Here I've made a mistake. So d5 apparently was bad. f6 was better. I considered f6. No, certainly stops the advance of that pawn. However, I was a little bit concerned. Well, what was I concerned about? I don't know. I wasn't sure I wanted to block off that square for my queen, I think. Opponent captures pawn, captures back, and I thought this was potentially okay with vision on the g2 pawn. Opponent pushes forward, which was what was expected, and now I play g5. So again, small advantage to white here. Opponent, so I suppose, puts the queen and the rook into a battery, but also they are attacking those two pawns. So ostensibly, good sort of move. I wasn't overly concerned, I thought. Yep, if they capture that pawn, then potentially I've got an attack back on the queen, which they have to move, and then that allows me to take back a pawn symmetrically on c2. And more than that, I then have two pieces looking at g2, which is a mate in one threat. So I thought, yep, so let's protect that pawn, move that forward, attack the queen. That's sort of encouraged it to take, which is what I suspected was going to happen. And you can see small advantage to black here, even though I'm down a piece. Stockfish wanted the other rook. I have to admit, can't really see why that was the case. And they made the best move. So with me capturing, they need to then, of course, provide defense to the g2 pawn. They play b3, which was apparently bad because basically it cedes the e file to me. So I can, of course, do the same thing by having another rook on that second rank. I expected my opponent now to to play rook f2, basically stop that. Here it seemed like it would make sense just to trade rooks, and that's what happened. Here I thought I would double them up. So apparently that wasn't the best move. Move the king out of the way first was, but here I am ahead. So that move where the opponent's queen captured that pawn was an error because it sort of led to this transformation, which now advantages me. Now I made this move thinking that wouldn't make sense for the opponent to do this because I would sort of end up ahead, and potentially here I've got the attack on the pawn. So they sort of made a non-move, I suppose. Rook f1, that makes sense. And here I thought, let's trade queens. So that's a forced queen trade. And Stockfish would have preferred me to capture, and I suppose that sort of makes sense, having the rook there. If the opponent tries to defend, then it should be fairly easy to end up capturing that pawn. However, my thought was now I've got sort of a passed pawn, and the opponent may be forced to do something about it. But they're, I suppose, one step ahead. Here I've got a check. They capture, and here I thought I now have an opportunity to take the rooks off the board, which is what I did. And from what I could tell, we've each have 5 pawns, but these 3 pawns are together. This pawn is isolated. My king is further up the board. My pawns, on average, are a little bit further up the board. So I thought I had a potential advantage here. So straight up, get the pawns up. Move the king. King opposition. They try to push their what is a passed pawn, but now I can block. And now with 3 on 2. So 2 on 2, these aren't doing anything. 3 on 2, I should be able to create a scenario where I can potentially win, but I always need to keep vision on this passed pawn. So Stockfish didn't like that, but in reality, with how the opponent moved, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Yeah, so now my pawns are all on the 5th rank, so I've got the space advantage, taking up space. Now, pushing forward, they have to pretty much, if they don't capture, here we go. And now it's like a force field. Okay, so king can't intrude, king can't go into any of those squares. Now it gives me a chance to bump off some of those pawns. Okay, so these two and these two, we each can't defend both, but my pawn is 1, 2, 3 steps away from promotion, and this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps away. That's going to make all the difference, I thought. So, yep, move back. They can capture, I can capture. And here, symmetrically, I am just those 2 steps ahead. And at this point, it's pretty much winning no matter what the opponent does. Now, the opponent actually makes the wrong move by pushing that pawn forward, because I can just straight up capture that, and that's what I do. But even if they do something else, so I think Stockfish reckoned to make that move, it basically doesn't really make a difference, because what I can do is I can just straight out plop my queen onto h7. That blocks advancement. The king cannot approach the queen, and then I just bring my king over, and I should be able to capture that last pawn. And then it's king and queen versus king, always winning. There's a sort of defined strategy to do that, which we'll see. So here we go. I capture. So pretty much this is the end. And the idea with queen and king endgames is to sort of stay the L. Keep like a knight's move away from the opponent's king. If they move, you follow it down. Yep, and here, once they're on the edge of the board, lock it in to the edge of the board, and then just bring the king over. And eventually, when you get opposition, the next move, you can bring, yep, and that will be checkmate. So good game with the opponent. GG. Firstly, in the endgame, the king is the most active piece, so it needs to lead. It has to be there where the action is thickest. The king can both capture pawns, of course, but it can also create a force field where the opponent king cannot intrude. Secondly, winning a king and pawn endgame is often about promoting a pawn to queen, and thus becomes a race for who can do this first. From this, 2 general heuristics become evident. You need to advance your pawns when you can, and you need to protect your passed pawns. In this game, if you look at the Stockfish recommended moves for my opponent, it often involved pushing their pawns forward. My opponent, however, ended up shuffling their king a few moves, and that allowed me to move my pawns as a line closer to their side of the board. After trades where we were down to one pawn each, I was simply 2 steps ahead, and this made all the difference. I hope you found this game interesting, and thanks for watching.